to CP Voice. Today we're here with New York Times best-selling author who's penned books such as Seven Men and Bonhoeffer. He's here today to talk about his new book, Miracles, which deals with, well, you guessed it, miracles, why we believe in them and why some of us don't. Please welcome New York City's very own Eric Metaxas to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you,
Great to have you.
Oh, thank you very much. I could tell from your accent you are also New York's own.
So obvious.
Right?
I get that all the time.
All right. I lived in Connecticut for a couple of years. I lost my accent, but I'm going to get it back.
Eventually?
Yes.
Hopefully?
That is my
That'll
charge
happen.
to you and to the American people. I'm going to get it back.
That's a goal. That's a goal in life.
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write a book about miracles?
It's actually hilarious. I had no intention of writing a book on miracles. What happened was I was having lunch here in Manhattan with an editor just talking about anything, and I shared a miracle story that happened in my life. I mean, I often share these stories because they're mind-blowing, they're real, and they happen. They can sort of prove God's existence to me on some level, and I don't mean prove. I just mean that it's very real, and it's powerful, and I always want to share these stories. And so I shared this story, and the editor looked at me and he said, "You need to write a book on miracles." And he was like emphatic, "You need to write a book on miracles." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you feel that way. I'm not going to write a book on miracles, but thanks for suggesting it." Because I just don't have any ideas about that. I mean, I've got a lot of ideas about miracles, but I have no idea about what a book would be like. So he kept bugging me about this and pursuing me, and I just laughed because I said, I just don't have a vision for what that book would be. But then finally he said, "Listen, I think this is such a good idea for a book, that there's such a hunger for this subject that I will find another writer if you really, really can't do it." And when he said that, it was interesting. And it wasn't a competition thing. It was just the opposite. I thought, what if somebody else writes this book and they get it really wrong, right? In other words, there are people out there that are hungry on this subject. I could picture somebody doing a version of this which what I would call very new agey, right? Not focusing on the God behind the miracles, but focusing just on the miracles. And it becomes very vague and foggy and cloudy. And people want real answers. People want clarity. And or somebody could write it in such a way that it's so religious and so Christian that it turns off people who aren't sure where they stand, And I said, it does make sense that somebody should write a book that's for the mainstream audiences. That's for everybody. Now, if you're a solid Christian, you will be challenged and encouraged, I believe, powerfully. But if you don't believe anything, I would say the same thing. I would say that you'll be really challenged to think more deeply about the nature of reality. Is it possible that miracles could happen? Why would we say it's not possible? What's the scientific evidence, and so on and so forth? So I was persuaded by this editor. That's what did it. And of course, my wife was really thinking that this was a good idea. And as any wise husband, I take my wife's opinion really seriously. And I also, as I got to write it, the more I wrote, the more I felt like I'm really glad I am writing this.
You can't disappoint your wife.
You better not. No.
So with that being said, you said there's such a hunger for stories about miracles in general. Why do you think people are so thirsty to learn about miracles, to see miracles in their lives, especially even Christians?
Well, I think it's pretty simple. First of all, if I'm speaking to other Christians, I would say we know that life is not an accident. We know that we're not here because of random forces. We know that life is not meaningless. We know all that stuff. But when you can see the God behind this reality, when he pokes in and communicates with us, when something like that happens, the heart thrills because we were made for that communication. Every human being, I would say, is made for that relationship and that communication. And so Christians, we know that there is something beyond this world, but we're still longing for tangible proof because we're human beings. It's not only about the intellect, that we want to experience it, right? When somebody says, "I experienced the love of God through a person," that means something, right? And so it has to become real. And miracles are one way that God makes himself real to us. And he doesn't do it all the time. He does it when he wants to do it, and all I can say is that if you want a really biblical theology, if you want to say, what does the Bible teach and what does the faith teach, you need to account for these kinds of things. People who dismiss it out of hand and say that, I believe that there was a time of miracles and then we got, the Bible and then we don't need miracles anymore. That can't be the case, because I have personally experienced a number of absolute clear examples of what I'm talking about. I know innumerable people that have had experiences. Now, some of them are a little vague and foggy, but most of them are not. And in the book, I only put the ones that were crystal clear, because I don't want to mislead the reader. And also, it was a particular thing. I said, I want to tell stories of miracles. When I was writing this book, I was thinking, I want to write about miracles. I want to ruminate philosophically, theologically, what are they? You know, sort of do a C.S. Lewis light treatment of the subject of miracles. But then I want to tell miracle stories that have happened today, yesterday, a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, like in our time, to people that I know. And I said, I'm only going to do it with people I know, people that I can look them in the eye, I know their character, I've spent time with them. It's not just some person telling a story.
So why is there this school of thought that just wishes to explain miracles away?
Well, I think because if you think that there's something beyond this world, I think we instinctively know that something might have a claim on us, that something might have something to say about our lives, and most of us aren't interested in that. You know, we want total independence, and it's a little disturbing to think that there's a God out there. Now, of course, that's silly, because if there is a God out there, it's just the opposite. That God is a source of infinite love, cares for us, loves us, wants to help us. But most people don't know that God. They have this cartoon vision of a moral policeman who's just wanting to prevent me from having fun, or something like that. So they would rather avoid it.
Cosmic killjoy.
Even the cosmic killjoy. Yeah, I don't know where that came, but maybe I coined it. No, I didn't. But it's just one of those things that's a general idea in the culture. And so I guess people want to say that we can only know what science can tell us.
Right.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, science is so extraordinary, but science cannot tell us why I should love my daughter or why I should help my neighbor. That's beyond the realm of science. So science can do what it can do, but to pretend that that's all there is, I mean, really it flies in the face of most actual evidence we have in human history. But you need to talk about that, because in our generation you hear that over and over and over again, that
right.
This is all there is, you know, only what science can teach us is real. That's totally nonsensical, but you hear it so often that people need to know why it's not true.
Right. Do you have to believe in God in order to believe in miracles? Do you think people run with miracles sometimes and they can get into trouble because they don't connect it with God?
Well,
what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, those are two questions. I would say that, yeah, if you don't connect a bona fide miracle to God, you can get into trouble, because if you're just looking for some kind of mystical experience, if you believe in a spiritual realm beyond this world, that's not all God. There's a dark spiritual realm, and if you're just looking for something interesting, you can find something interesting, and it can lead you in a very bad direction.
Absolutely.
And that's just a fact. But you don't need to believe in God to believe in miracles, in the sense that I would say to a skeptic, if you're just open to what is real, what is the nature of the universe, the idea that there could be such a thing as miracles, and again, we have to define miracles, but I mean just the idea that something could come from outside the system, something could come from outside time and space and inject itself into time and space, that's not irrational. That's perfectly rational. And if you don't know where it's coming from or who's behind it, if you're not acquainted with, you know, what I would say is the God behind it, it doesn't mean that you can't still think philosophically about the concept. And, you know, whether that ever leads you to acknowledge the God or not is really a separate issue. But the question of whether this reality can be touched by a reality outside this reality, you know, that's a question for everybody, I would say.
Interesting. Is there any more information that you want to give our viewers about where they can find the book and where they can learn more about it?
They can't have this copy. I got to take this with me. But basically, the book launches October 28th. So my publisher begged me to say that anybody watching this before October 28th should pre-order the book. For some reason, that's very important. So you can go to Barnes & Noble, you can go to Amazon, you go to Books A Million. Actually, they've got big discounts now. So you can pre-order the book, and it'll get to you either October 28th or before or after, sometime around then. So I would ask people to do that. But if you're watching this before October 28th or on October 28th, on the night of October 28th, I'm pretty psyched, we're going to have a Socrates in the City event. People can go to socratesinthecity.com. I run these events here in Manhattan for years, and I usually interview people. but this time I'm going to be interviewed by a guest host named Dick Cavett. I think you're too young to know who that is. Legend.
Maybe before my time.
Absolute TV legend. He's going to interview me on the subject of miracles, and anybody can tune in. It's a webcast. So if you go to SocratesInTheCity.com, you can watch it live. And anything can happen. There could be, streakers, pies in the face. We don't know. So you got to watch it live.
Maybe not the streakers.
But if you go to SocratesInTheCity.com, all the links are there, and it is free, so anybody can watch it. And it should be a fun evening. Anybody who's a fan of Dick Cavett knows what I'm talking about. It's pretty good.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to learning more about the book.
Thank you.
Miracles is available wherever books are sold on October 28th. You can go out and pre-order it today. For any questions or inquiries, email us at cpvoice@christianpost.com. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Eric Metaxas is passionate about the existence of miracles. His view on them are God-centered, as he believes they always point back to the Lord. I learned how he pays attention to every little detail to give his readers the most accurate information in his work. As an author, he shines, and as a believer, he is grounded in biblical truth.